Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one we're going to be looking at OSL, or Object Source Lighting. So I've got this rather nice miniature here from Resin Miniatures, and we're going to be basically working on an object source lighting on this. And basically what that means is, so in this case these acorns that are on this staff are going to be the light source. Now they'll be putting their light down on the rest of the miniature, only in a small area, to give the illusion that that part of the miniature is actually a light, and creating a really nice contrast and light source on the paint job itself. Now this is a technique that I've dabbled with a little bit in the past, but in particular I'm going to use the tips that I found on another YouTube channel called Resourceful Miniatures, which I'll put a link to the channel in the description. He's got 4 or 5 OSL tutorials, and what I like about it as well is he'll do ones where there's no airbrush, because it is a lot easier to use an airbrush, it seems anyway, watching videos online, but he goes through how to actually do this sort of style of painting, but without the airbrush. So I thought I'd give it a go. So to start with, the miniature's been base coated in black, and then I've added a little bit of midnight blue to that black, and I'm just going through now and just overbrushing, picking up on all the highlighted areas, and we're just going to highlight this up because the idea is the base colour will be sort of like moonlit, and then the actual light source itself, as you saw in the thumbnail, that'll be that green light that emanates from those magical acorns over the miniature, and it should give the impression that it's lit up in the darkness. So we'll go from there. So initially just getting this blue coat down, doing some highlights, so it looks like the whole miniature's under like a nice sort of moonlit natural lighting all over. So I've progressively added more blue to the black paint and building up those highlighting layers on the raised parts of the miniature, and just concentrating on making that high contrast until this final sort of highlight layer, where I'm just picking out those few key areas that are facing right up, because when we go through to add the colour for the actual lighting, this will play a big part in it. Now, one of the nice tips that he does as well is he explains that if you have got to a point that you may have highlighted too much, which on this, the uppermost highlight is fine, but of actually as the sort of where the light source is going to emanate from, so down the sides of the bird and the underside is actually a little bit too bright, which on the next step what we can do is dull that back down. So it's a case now, before we do that, is this bit here is just make sure the highest points I'm hitting, nowhere else, and making sure we get quite a stark contrast between light and dark in this blue colour, or if you're painting it and trying this out in whatever the base colour is, and that includes using a full colour scheme and then doing the light source method on top. You'll see how it works. It'll actually work with any colour. I decided to keep it simple in this one because it's, as I say, OSL is something I've not really dabbled with, and so I wanted to have a try of it like this first. And to be fair, it's worked out quite well. There's a lot of things I've learned from it which we'll go through, but it's just making sure that contrast on the base colours is high enough. So the uppermost points you want to be extremely bright, because when we do that colour wash over it for the light source, it's just going to make it pop that a little bit more. Right, so by adding the lighter blue into the black base coat and working one up, I've got my highest high points now. And now what I want to do, and this is from his video, so the contrast between the brightest points and the darkest points isn't quite as high as it should be, and therefore that'll affect that object lighting that we're going to put on. So one of the things he recommends, which I'm doing here, is I've got myself a dark blue wash, and I'm just hitting, if you see, all the underside of the areas, just to darken down again all those areas that maybe I've gone a bit too far on the highlights. So especially in the wings, picking out all those little areas that curve down towards the belly. And all this is going to do is, again, is just apply that contrast before we put the colour of the lighting on, and just make sure everything is exactly as I want. Also the side of the miniature, so in particular the little rider on this bird, that the light isn't going to wrap around and touch. That's going to get a bit of blue wash as well, just to darken it down, and it helps just differentiate all those little areas and all the fine bits of detail as well, like a wash normally does. Don't be worried, obviously, when this dries, because it's an army paint to wash, it's very, very glossy. The whole thing's going to get a nice matte finish anyway, so don't worry too much about the sort of texture differences on there. But you can see around picking out underneath little straps and bits of rope and things, anything that would have a slightly darker shadow, they're all going to get picked out. The underside of the feather on the bird's hat there, because again that light's not going to penetrate it, and you're not going to see the most of the extreme sort of colour changes from the source lighting. And it's just a case of going around and picking out those little things here and there, just to dull it down a little bit, so the contrast is really high, and that's what's going to make the colour work when we come to do the actual the green light coming from the magical acorns themselves. Right, so this is the start of the actual OSL itself. What I'm going to do is, after I've finished talking, I'm actually going to let the clip play fully, just so you can get a better sense of it. So what I'm figuring out here, and this is something he goes through in his videos, so I do recommend you go and watch them and re-watch them if you need to. It took me a couple of times to figure it out, but effectively on the source light, what we're looking at is there's roughly a circle that will come out, and that's the colour that's going to hit. Now the way it works is you get a heavily watered down filter colour, because obviously the way it explains it is anywhere where the light is reflected on the miniature, it won't be any brighter than the actual source of the light itself, and that's important to keep in mind. So what I've done is I've got a nice bluey green, watered it down, just wick off the extra moisture on a bit of paper towel because you don't want it too watery, but the main thing is the pigment's really loose, and then we're just going round, and all the raised areas that would be hit by the light are just getting this initial coat, and we're basically going to do several layers of this and building up the opacity to give the idea that the light source is reflecting off the creature and the part of the model in question, and just making a difference between that sort of bluey moonlight and then this green magical light that's going to be emanating from this source. And you basically want to build up layers. Take your time with it. If you make a mistake, you can just go back to your previous, in this case the blue layer, and dull it back down if needs be. But you'll see I'll just keep going around now and adding, and I'm never really going beyond that sphere of light that I've sort of mapped out at the start, and it'll build up from there. And by this point I'm on, I've gone back round, and this is about my second, in some areas third coat of this glaze, and you can see now, you can start to see the differentiation in the colours from the blue to this bluey green. And again, I'll keep building up the contrast on this, adding layers and adding more of the green in to match the source lighting. And as you can see, I'm just mapping out areas where the light's going to hit. It's quite a stark contrast. You can see here like a few raised areas on the hat, the hood of the bird, but I'm not going all the way down to the beak, and just keeping it within that tight sphere of light. At this point it's got several watered down layers, and you can see now, it should be apparent where that light source is going to be. Now, it was at this point I realised that the colour I chose was a bit too close to the original blue, so from here in we're going to go for a higher green, but it will cover on top of this quite nicely, and go on really easily. We're going to keep this as our sort of foundation layer for the light source. And it's just a case of picking two colours that contrast really well. So with the nighttime sort of moonlit blue that I've got, I decided to go for this really punchy green. So this is where it starts to come together, and you're going to see the effects now. It's a really fun process. I do recommend people go and watch his tutorials and then give it a go themselves on a miniature. By adding more of that green now, it's gonna, as I say, you're going to see the bigger contrast between getting rid of more of the bluey hues that I've already put on the light. But you'll see again, I'll leave all this footage to run a bit longer than I normally would, and you can see that I'm going to the edges of that initial layer. And all I'm doing for this first layer is the exact same again, except I've got more of the green in, and then from there we're going to build up. And it's a lot of fun. It is difficult, but as he says in his videos, if you do little parts at a time, take your time with it, and make sure you take a moment to sort of look back before you go in and add any more, and just slowly build it up. You can't go wrong, and it gives a really interesting effect. Obviously with the amount of the stuff that I've learnt by painting this miniature, I'm definitely going to do more in the future. There's a few things on this one, looking at it as a finished result, that I would change. But yeah, it's been an absolute joy to do this, and as I say, I do recommend it. Give it a go if you get a chance. If you've got a miniature that's got a nice source of light that you can paint on there, because you'd be surprised how easy it actually is. Because when you see that these finished miniatures with the OSL, it looks a bit, you're like, oh god, that's really technical, but it's actually not that difficult. It's effectively just lots of layers of very watered down painting glazes, and build it up from there. And this is, you should see now the opacity is building up, and you've got, especially on the if you look at the mouse rider on the miniature, the one side is that sort of midnight moon lit blue, and then the other side is the green, and it's building up from there. Right, so now we're adding more of that green into the mix. This isn't as watered down now. This is not a glaze consistency, just like a normal, just a little bit of water in there, and you can see now I'm just picking out the highest areas, taking my time as I go around, and it's as if it's hitting all those raised edges that we would have highlighted if it's a normal paint job in the brightest, and this is just making that light source as it's emanating. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is something Resourceful Miniatures does in his videos, so the source of the light itself will be the brightest of the colour that you choose. So I know that at this point, so on my palette I've got some of the green mixed in with a little bit of yellow, and I know that'll be the absolute brightest. So I'm making sure that I'm not going as high as that when I'm doing all these little speculative highlights on certain areas. And you see when I'm picking out details like on the wicker basket or the top of the stones, the back of the stone in particular, or the other side of the mouse's face, it's not getting affected by the light source. And then as you build up into that brightness, it should look like it's lit up, and that's the point of OSL in miniature painting. And it's just a case now again of, like with the previous steps, take your time, go through, do little bits here and there. If you feel like you want to push the contrast a bit more, make things look a bit brighter, because as it's closer to the light source, so in this instance the side of the mouse's face, the rocks on his back and the little basket and his shoulder, that should be more green than say the ropes down by the bird's hood, or down by the bottom of his tail and things like that. And you slowly building up that transparency of colour, and it starts to look like it's lit up. So as I'm getting close to the source of the light, I'm adding more of the green into that mix, and then you'll see the sort of that sphere of where the light's emanating from is slowly shrinking. So I'm doing, in this case, I'm concentrating now more on the acorns, the shaft of the staff that he's wearing, and then it's more of the speculative highlights on his head, his shoulder, a little bit of the raised tip of the tail that's sticking up closer to the light source, and a little bit on the wicker basket. That's where I'm concentrating more on now, as that the more prominence, the sort of brightest of the green is going to shrink in till we get to the acorns themselves, and it should, as I say, it should look like it's lit up. And you see here, building up the opacity, you can see the variation out between the side of him that's not in the light. And I'm just picking like the upturn of that tail. You can spend more time and do like different types of fabric would reflect differently. This is my first real sort of go of OSL, so I'm keeping it very simple. It's definitely something I'd recommend everyone should try, because it's a lot of fun, and you can do some really cool things with different colours as well, like magical lights like this with greens, or maybe oranges, and those warmer tones for like traditional fire and things. And like I always say, worst case scenario is you strip the paint, start again if you really have to. But now we'll be going into you'll see now as it's getting brighter on the acorns, where I'm adding the yellow in, and it really starts to pop and work. And you see here, so this is where I've got much more of the yellowy green, so the whole of the acorn will get this, a little bit on the shaft again of the staff, and a few tiny areas on the actual mouse itself. But I'm keeping it so as it gets closer, it's getting brighter as well. And Overall it looks pretty good. I think the line down the middle of him is perhaps a bit too straight from where his nose is down to sort of where his belly would be as he's sitting on this saddle. But the actual, it looks, for me anyway, it looks like the light source is emanating around the bird as well, and it's pretty cool. It's a nice little, it's like a very localized area of light. Maybe I should have gone further out with the light. That's one thing I'd say. But as I say, it's a process I've really enjoyed doing. It's really simple, just a couple of colours, and I had a lot of fun with it. As I say, I recommend it, everyone. Honestly give it a go. If you've got a miniature that's got like a little torch, a little lantern or something, keep it simple if you need to, and just again imagine those little bubbles of area where the light will be, and as it slowly contracts in to the source of the light, it gets brighter. And then the big tip is anywhere where there's a highlight from the light source, it will never be brighter than the light itself. But yeah, go and watch Resourceful Miniatures videos on it. They're absolutely brilliant. He's really succinct, and they're actually very bite-sized episodes as well. They're not long form like this, but he really gets everything through, everything that he's trying to explain, and as I say, it's helped me with it, and it's something I'm definitely going to do more of in the future. As I say, overall I'm very happy with this, how it's turned out. And it's pretty simple. It's just follow the instructions on Resourceful Miniatures video. That's all I can say, and you can't go wrong with it. A couple of things I'd change. I think I'd have the light source as a bigger circle on the miniature, so it hits more of the bird and more of a focal point, mainly because there seems like a bit too much of a distinct line down his chest. But other than that, really happy with this, and as I say, it's something I'm going to dabble with more in the future as we go on. But thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget the podcast is up with me and Welsh Miniature Board Gamer every other week, so it'll be on tomorrow as this video goes out, and then 2 weeks from there. And if you've got any questions or anything you'd like us to talk about, please let us know. But thank you all very much for watching. See you on the next one. Cheers.